I think the idea of being declared a persona non grata and then given a week to get out of the United States is designed to humiliate you. It's designed to hurt you. But when you come back to Cape Town and you are met by thousands of people at the airport and you are acclaimed across the world for having spoken truth to power, you then know that you have achieved something in terms of being a witness for truth and a witness for justice.
Tremendous. Look, this is a story recent. These are all people that recently got killed.
It is such a palpable falsehood about the white genocide. It is gaslighting at the global level that our supremacists, our oppressors are today portrayed as the victim of a genocide, victims of discrimination, in much the same way that Israel uses the tragedy of the Holocaust as the license to do what it wants.
Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool, thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure and welcome to Cape Town.
Jazakallah khair. So you're a veteran diplomat. MashaAllah, you've had quite an extensive sort of career. You've been an anti-apartheid campaigner, a lifelong anti-apartheid campaigner. You've been the ambassador to Washington. And subhanAllah, you've been the Premier of the Western Cape, and you've been the senior advisor to President Nelson Mandela. Earlier this year, you were declared a persona non grata and expelled from the United States after you made some comments criticizing Trump's MAGA movement, saying that it stirred supremacist instinct and played on white victimhood. Soon after that, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said that you were a race-baiting politician that hates America and hates Donald Trump. So maybe let's begin there. Just for the record, do you hate America and do you hate Donald Trump?
Hatred comes with great difficulty to a South African and with greater difficulty to a South African Muslim. My religion, Islam, does not teach hate, and certainly the example of Nelson Mandela does not even encourage hate to those who threw me in prison, to those who threw me out of our house, to those who oppressed us. And so hatred is a very strong word, and I think that I deserve and I reserve the right to speak freely. I went to prison for it, and I reserve the right to be able constructively to criticize what I see as supremacism, because we lived through it, we have early detection for those kind of instincts, and that's what I called.
You said that you will wear your persona non grata as a badge of dignity. Now, many will see this as some form of humiliation or even as a career setback. What gives you so much pride and confidence in your stance?
I think the idea of being declared a persona non grata and then given a week to get out of the United States is designed to humiliate you. It's designed to hurt you. But when you come back to Cape Town and you are met by thousands of people at the airport, and you are acclaimed across the world for having spoken truth to power, and you are one of 200 ambassadors in Washington who was heard in the Oval Office and whose words stung, you then know that you have achieved something in terms of being a witness for truth and a witness for justice. And it's that makes me feel that if nothing else, that I was an ambassador for a short period of time that was able to make an impact on the mindset of a president who routinely bullies, routinely insults, and routinely humiliates people.
The South African government, labelled and called your expulsion as regrettable, yet they stand by their principles. Do you feel like you were supported back home in South Africa?
I think there was great support amongst the ordinary people in South Africa. There was cautious support by the government of South Africa, especially because we have such deep interests in our trade and economic relationships with the United States. We're a poverty-stricken country. We are an underdeveloped country. And so we need the markets of the United States. We need the investments of the United States. And therefore, I can understand the caution of the South African government, but I can also admire the South African government for sticking to its values, particularly the case that we have launched charging Israel with genocide in the International Court of Justice.
Now, many would say that the ambassador should stick to diplomacy and not really activism. What's it like? What does it mean for you to be a man of principle in a world of politics?
I was once asked, what is my definition of diplomacy? My definition is that it is to tell the truth gently. Never to lie, not even for your country. Never to betray your principles, not even for your interests. But to tell the truth in a beautiful and gentle way. And that's what I thought I was doing, because I was neither crude nor rude in criticizing the United States. I did a constructive, even intellectual critique of the United States, but I needed to convey the truth of what I was witnessing, what I was experiencing, and what I was anticipating.
Do you feel that South Africa's case at the ICJ against Israel might have influenced the decision to expel you?
I think it was front and center, because from the moment that it was announced that I would be ambassador, the South African core around Donald Trump sprang into action. Two of them happened to be Jewish and Zionist. The one was in Breitbart News. The other was writing against diversity. Both of them were central to AIPAC. And AIPAC sprang into action against me. It was reported all over, Jewish reports, about how I should be rejected by Donald Trump. And that was 2 months before I even reached the shores of the United States. It intensified while I was in the United States. And all the time, the demand on me was, you can get whatever trade you wanted as long as South Africa withdraws its case against Israel in the International Court of Justice. And so I have no doubt that that is the most important thing that hurt Israel, its Zionist diaspora, and particularly its backers like the United States of America.
Now, South Africa is quite well renowned for breaking down the apartheid, and they've been literally leading the case against Israel in the ICJ, and so many nations have actually joined this particular case. In your opinion, what does that say about South Africa's leadership on the world stage?
South Africa is a poor country. It's not an economic power. It is not a military superpower, not even in Africa. But it is a moral superpower. It fought its supremacists here, white supremacy, in a dignified way. It settled it in a largely peaceful way. It was able to then export democracy, human rights, and freedom across the African continent. And it bore witness to justice wherever it was needed in the world. And so our DNA is such that when we see injustice, we react. South Africa, when it saw the reaction of Israel over the years, its occupation, its reaction to the Intifada, its reaction particularly since October 7th, 2023, we knew that there was not only something disproportionate in Israel's action against the people of Gaza, there was something evil about it. It was an intent for genocide. It was an intent for patricide, the killing of the idea of a Palestinian state. And it was relying on a vericide, the killing of the truth about the situation. And so South Africa waited for Palestine's neighbors to react. It waited for the region to react. It waited for the Muslim world to react. And when none of them reacted, a small, vulnerable country on the southern tip of Africa had to stand up against its own interest. It knew that we were potentially sacrificing trade and investment relations with the Western and Northern worlds. But we felt if we don't act, who will act? And that is what informed our case against Israel in the ICJ.
Nelson Mandela once famously said that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. How do you think this legacy shapes the relationship with South Africa and the Palestinian cause today?
I think that's fundamental. I had the wonderful honor to be with Nelson Mandela in 1990 when he invited me to travel as his advisor through Africa, 14 African states in 2.5 weeks we visited. We went through different countries, but it was in Cairo that I accompanied Nelson Mandela on his reunion with Yasser Arafat. It was there that I heard the depth of the relationship, about how when we were rejected in the West, we were welcomed with the Palestinians in training camps, in places like Algeria and so forth. I heard the exchange between them about changing tactics in the world, how we were confronting through diplomacy and negotiations our oppressors, and what could this mean for the Palestinians in relation to Israel. So the depth is not a diplomatic relationship. It is in blood, sweat, and tears. And that is what makes South Africa's heart beat with the Palestinians. That is why we could jeopardize our interests in order to advance our values.
How do you think your Muslim faith has helped you navigate this ordeal, being expelled and even fighting for the Palestinian cause?
Being expelled and knowing that they designed humiliation for me. There was a verse in Surah Muzammil that overwhelmed my mind. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wasbir ala ma yaqulun wahjurhum hajran jamila. Be resilient, endure, be patient with what they say, and always give them the face of a beautiful dignity. I was so convinced I will not show them vulnerability. I will not show them my hurt. I will not show them weakness, but that I will keep my dignity intact because what I stand for is the right thing. And so that, together with the injunction, وَقُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقِّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلِ, that truth must be spoken, truth must be evident, and the batil must be confronted. Falsehood must be confronted. Between those two, I think I navigated not just that episode of being declared persona non grata, but every moment of challenge in my life. And that has been the kind of watchword that I think has shaped who Ebrahim Rasool is.
MashaAllah. Given the, in your opinion, do you believe that the ICJ case that's set up by South Africa against Israel will lead to some real change for the Palestinians on the ground, or even by shifting the international community's perspective on the situation?
I think South Africa understands the world of impunity that the West and the North enjoy. They can do what they want to because they are economic and military superpowers. We were surprised that 14 of the 15 judges of the ICJ found an interim order for genocide against Israel. We don't know what will happen in a few months' time when the final order. But even if the final order were to confirm a genocide, we don't believe that Israel will have the will, or even the West will have the wherewithal to compel Israel to cede to the ruling of the ICJ. We can see also the attempt to destroy any idea of a Palestinian state. We don't know whether we can stop it. There may be a figment of a Palestinian state, but it will be pockmarked with Israeli settlements that would make the state completely unviable. But what South Africa did succeed in is to prevent the Vericide, the killing of the truth. Because that ICJ ruling really spread across the world. It unmasked the so-called veneer of civility and civilization and democracy of the Israeli state. It exposed who was funding the genocide and who was arming the genocide. It inspired the campuses across the Western world and the streets across the Western world to rise up against their capitals. It inspired a silent but seething anger in the streets of the Middle East, even against their palaces. And so the Vericide was prevented because the truth was now evident, and suddenly Israeli, American, and European fingerprints were all over the genocide. In that lies the hope that possibly we could find a moment of recoil, even by Western governments who find it more difficult to hide their shame in supporting the genocide.
Tensions between South Africa and the United States have recently sort of grown. We've seen what's happened in the Oval Office theatre, if you ask me, with claims of white discrimination. By Donald Trump making claims such as a white genocide. Elon Musk saying things like the laws are openly racist. Is there any truth to these claims?
It is such a palpable falsehood about the white genocide. It is gaslighting at the global level. That our supremacists, our oppressors, are today portrayed as the victim of a genocide, victims of discrimination, victims of land confiscation, when the truth is that 7% of the population own 72% of the land. That 7% of the population own 90% of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. That 7% of the population occupies 60% of the management positions in the private sector in this country. Those are the facts, not the false crosses that Donald Trump shown about thousands of deaths. It is unfortunate, any death and white deaths in this country, but the past 10 years have only seen 630 farm murders, mostly white, because they own most of the farms. But within those farm murders are also significant black farm workers killed by those same white farm owners, such as 2 women, not under apartheid, last year in 2024, 2 women shot for consuming expired dairy products that was going to be dumped, shot and then fed to the pigs on the farm. A man allegedly drunk being dragged behind the bakkie, the pickup truck of the white farm owner for 70 meters until he died. And so that's the reality. And when I speak about gaslighting, those are the realities that we are dealing with. And so there's no white genocide. But a supremacist movement requires white victims in order to justify themselves. In the same way that our oppressors needed Boer concentration camps by the Brits to justify why they need total power in South Africa, in much the same way that Israel uses the tragedy of the Holocaust as the license to do what it wants. So a supremacist movement historically requires victims in order to be the fig leaf for the evils that they may want to do unto the world.
What were your thoughts when you watched the meeting between Donald Trump and President Ramaphosa in the Oval Office recently?
It was a sense of deja vu. That was the kind of standoffs I had with members of Congress, senators, when they peddled genocide, land confiscation to me. And I was at least given a chance to put these facts to them. They did not want to listen. They did not want to believe, but I knew that I was making an impact when I speak, about the atrocities that also happened to blacks on farms. That I could give the numbers. You're not speaking about thousands perishing. I, in fact, joked with him. If your definition of a white genocide is 630 white farmers killed over 10 years, we should subpoena you to be the star witnesses in the case against Israel, because you could amplify 630 to 70,000 Palestinians killed in the last few months.
How do you feel when, for example, Donald Trump calls out land theft and murder on South Africa, but then turns a blind eye when it comes to Israel?
I think it's hypocrisy. And it's hypocrisy laced with racism. Why would 630 white lives be eminently more valuable than 70,000 Palestinian lives? Why would importing white Afrikaners into the United States as refugees trump the export of thousands of black and brown immigrants into Venezuelan jails? I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out the racial dynamics, the justice dynamics, the human rights dynamics, and the dynamics of common decency to work out what is at play.
What would you say to young Muslims who want to take up politics in order to change, and call for justice on the global scale today?
Firstly, it is absolutely critical that Muslims should be involved in the political and the geopolitical sphere in the world. Secondly, we need to be guided by a fiqh of the socio-political and economic sphere as well. We are overwhelmed by the fiqh of ibadat, and we are underwhelmed in the sphere of the fiqh of mu'amalat, the jurisprudence of the socio-economic and political. And that's important to guide us, because if we don't have that fiqh, we can be capable of our anger leading to atrocity. And then we become that which we are opposing. So we need to get involved in it, but in a way guided by our scriptures. Secondly, there is no shortcut. You can't wake up angry one morning and decide you're going to do something about the injustices in the world. It means that you've got to be able to choose the kind of vehicle for your activism, whether it is a non-government organization or, particularly in the West, the party that would be the lesser of any other evil. It's the way in which we built, as South African Muslims, our credibility in South African society through many, many years of being ordinary branch members of the African National Congress, elevating ourselves to regional leaders, elevating ourselves to national leaders, into governor positions and premier positions and ministerial positions. There are no shortcuts. In much the same way, we built an organization called the Call of Islam. We affiliated to Desmond Tutu's interfaith movement. We affiliated to Nelson Mandela's liberation movement. And we kept our identity as Muslims as we did that. But we did not hide away from forming coalitions, alliances, and fronts with others also fighting for justice. So you've got to be able to do those kind of things, but always with your foot firmly anchored in the scripts of Islam, so that your values will always shine out. And finally, you've got to be able to have a comprehensive view of justice and injustice while maybe fighting an issue. Because you cannot want justice between black and white and then tolerate injustice against women in your house. You cannot be very outspoken on injustice to Palestinians who happen to be Muslim, but silent about injustice to the indigenous in other places who don't happen to be Muslim. Your view has to be comprehensive and so forth. So I would think that we've got to get involved. We've got to get involved early. We've got to get involved anchored. We've got to get involved comprehensive. If in order for us, and I end on this note, for us to understand that before our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Rasulullah, the one who gave the message of Allah. He was Al-Amin, the trustworthy. He earned trust in Meccan society so that when he proclaimed the truth, he did not do so with a trust deficit. And that's what we've got to do in our societies, earn the trust of our communities as a reliable partner for justice, for decency and civility.
Given the setbacks that you've had and the attempts to silence your voice, what gives you the drive to continuously pursue the justice?
I think it's as fard as the Salah you must do. Aqimis Salah, stand for Salah. Kunu qawwamina bil qist, stand up for justice. Those are two fards. And so on the one hand you must comply. On the other hand, Rahmatul lil Alameen, a mercy unto all human beings, means that you must be able to feel the compassion with those who are unjust, even if they don't eat like you, talk like you, pray like you, dress like you, and operate like you. And therefore, between the impulse towards justice and the mercy that is inherent in Allah, in the mission of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in the work of ordinary Muslims, those are the things that keep you going. But I think that we need to understand that our destination is the akhirah, inshallah, the year after. But we live in the dunya. And for as long as we live in the dunya, we have certain things that can't be tolerated. The cardinal one is injustice. And therefore, just by being part of our society, we have to stand up for justice.
What's your message to those that feel that there is no hope for justice within the global powers of today and the world that we live in today?
You know, the first ayat of Surah Baqarah defines Iman and the faithful as believing in that which you have not yet seen. We have not seen Allah, but we believe in Allah. That's why we don't fall silent when people say, show us your God. And therefore, our hope and our faith comes from the fact that we work every day towards something in order to realize it, whether in our lifetime or in our children's lifetime. And so hopelessness and despair is not part of the faithful. Faith is about hope, and it is about an optimism about the future. That's what makes life livable for us. It's either optimism in a better world or optimism for the akhirah. And so there's no place for despair. You've just got to be cheerful every day. You've just got to be working every day. You've just got to make sure every day that you get up determined to fight. And when I speak about fight, I'm not speaking about the battlefield. Everything we do is an act of jihad. Whether I get up and I go to work and I resist temptations at work and I resist distractions at work and I'm able to do it, that is what we do for justice. That builds the hope. Whether I go to school and I learn, it is about what can I do with the skills I acquire and how will I make the world better. When I go to the masjid to pray, who do I make dua for? How do I improve myself? How do I place myself accountable to Allah? Those are the very kind of things that I think we need to simply do to get away from the idea that this is a despairing world.
MashaAllah, jazakallah khair. Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool, thank you so much for your time.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much.